Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and the breaking news, and it is breaking news today. Many people very excited that there has been an arrest in the very long-running Long Island serial killer case. They have arrested this man. He's a 59-year-old. He's an architect. He lives here. He's being arrested in connection with the Gilgo Beach murders, not all of the Long Island murders, but the 4 women in Gilgo Beach. He lived in Massapequa Park, New York, which is quite close. And he is an architect, has offices in New York, at least he did. He's 59 years old. His name is Rex Heuermann. And so it's pretty exciting news. And I want to address, he's a suspect right now. I want to say he's been arrested. I don't believe he's been charged at this point. The police are all over his house, taking out a whole bunch of stuff. He's a married man. So, I'll link the video below that a lot of people are going to, because he was interviewed a while back, talking about his business, and people are watching this going, oh my God, this is so creepy, because here he is speaking for about 20 minutes. He's being interviewed. He's fairly personable. He makes a lot of jokes. So people are looking at him going, oh my God. And he's a serial killer. Obviously, an educated man, a man who has done well as far as life goes, as got married, he's got a business. And I want to point out right now that this is not unusual for certain types of serial killers. So I want to get into, is he a good suspect? He's not necessarily guilty. This has not been proven, but is he a good suspect? All right. And my answer to that is yes. And let me explain this a little further. Now, I will link also to this show. I did a video on the Long Island serial killer probably a couple years ago, I think it was. This is it. And I said, is a serial killer already in prison? And the guy on the right is John Bitroff, and he is a serial killer in the area, and he was available to do these crimes. So my question was, what could it be him? And I looked at the case, and I came up with, I showed 3 possibilities. The fellow on the left was some that many, many people on the internet were going crazy about. It was the police chief. Oh, the police chief did it. It's clear he went to parties with certain women at them, and we think he's crooked and da-da-da-da-da. And they went crazy about the police chief on the left, saying clearly the reason this case hasn't been solved because was part of law enforcement. He was blocking the case from being solved. And I personally did not agree with that. I did not see the police chief on the left as being a good suspect in the Long Island serial killer. Bitroff in the middle was a good suspect because he lived in the area. He was a carpenter, which might account for those burlap bags. He had the ability to do it, and he had the time frame to do it. And so I don't know what the police found out about him or didn't during the course of their investigation, but he was a good suspect. The guy on the right side of the screen is the unknown guy. Who is this guy? Don't know. Could always be, well, it could be the Long Island serial killer, and maybe now it's this guy. All right. So one of the problems you have in serial homicide cases is that there are often numerous suspects over time, numerous creepy guys, people that have even committed rapes before, or who were in the area acting strangely, or were picking up prostitutes or hiring prostitutes. One of the other big suspects in this case for the internet, not for me, was Shannon Gilbert. She was a young woman who started basically the search for all the women because she made a phone call to a 911 saying, help, they're trying to kill me, because she was prostituting and she had been hired by somebody in this area. There's more down here in this area by this man, and she ran out of his house, and then her driver was looking for her, and she ran to some other house where there was a doctor, and he was kind of a weirdo, and so he became a suspect. And then she was found dead, and everybody was thinking, well, hey, somebody killed her, and then she's, it must be the Long Island serial killer. But there was no evidence that she was killed by any killer. It was more likely that it was an unfortunate accidental death. But people were saying the guy who hired her is the Long Island serial killer. And then the weirdo doctor whose house she stopped at was the Long Island serial killer. And again, I didn't believe either one of those. due to location, due to facts, and also that Gilbert was not, in my opinion, a murder victim. So who was it? And you've got in this area many choices. And so when you're looking at who did it, you have to look at the evidence that you actually have. And let me tell you the most important evidence I thought was out there. One was the location. Gilgo Beach, where the four were found quite close to each other. So although there are other bodies found along this route, they could be other serial killers. So, or other killers. It doesn't mean that every one of them was a serial killer. It isn't a kind of an isolated location, a great place to dump bodies. Usually you don't have a bunch of bodies dumped in the same place unless it is a serial killer. So could the guy have done most of them? Theoretically, Long Island serial killer could have not just been the Gilgo Beach, but could be more. But those four right here together, because they were so close, probably the same guy. So the Gilgo Beach murders were the most important pieces of evidence in this location. All right. The next piece of evidence was the burlap bags that some of the bodies were wrapped in. It's like, who has burlap bags? And people don't usually go out and say, I'm going to kill some women, so let me go buy some burlap bags. It's usually something that's part and parcel of their lifestyle, their industry, working in construction of some sort, hunting, carpentry, landscaping. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be their work. It could be something they do around their own home or their hobby. And that's why Bittroff was interesting, because he's a carpenter, and this guy's an architect, and he does do carpentry as well. But I don't know what he does around his home and all of that. So my question is, did he use burlap bags in some part of his life? This will be an interesting clue. The next thing to me is the location, of course, is extremely important. No, it wasn't going to be somebody from out of state. In other words, somebody from Jersey wasn't probably going to go all the way up here with a body in their in their vehicle and dump it over here. I mean, could they have come up here to hire prostitutes and then dump them here and then go back to Jersey? Sure. And one of the things I pointed out in my other video, and I'll point out here again, is when one is analyzing a crime, whether you're a criminal profiler or a detective, you have to not ignore information, but also not jump to conclusions. All right. Don't get tunnel vision. Bittroff, for me, was one of the better suspects. But I always said, I don't know if it's Bittroff, could be somebody else. Because just because Bittroff has interesting connections doesn't mean it's him. All right. But he would be high on my list. Now, that police chief, I didn't find any connections at all. But I said, I don't think it's him, but I wouldn't exclude him. I could put him low on the list, but I wouldn't exclude him. And the unknown guy, well, he's unknown. And so people should, well, not people, the investigators should keep looking for him. And if they have information to give to the public that the public can help identify that unknown person, the unknown killer, fine. Then they can give information into the police. So you want to keep your options open. And so one of the things you're going to see if you go back and watch my old video, which it's interesting because a lot of times when profilers will not go public with any of their profiling at all, because the worst thing it'd do is to say, I think this person did it, and turns out to be completely wrong, and they look like idiots. But profilers can be wrong, and so can investigators. That's why until you have absolute evidence for arrest, probable cause to charge, and then the prosecution can prove it, it's all a continuing investigation. And as a profiler, if I go work with a police department, and I'm working with it, and I only have, let's say I have this certain amount of evidence, I'm going to base my profile on this evidence. If all of a sudden a year later they go, oh, by the way, we just got all this evidence in, you go, well, that changes things. Now I might have a completely different profile, because profiling is not a permanent determination. It's not I know who did it. It's part of an investigative method. So all detectives profile. Okay, they're actually the top profilers because they have the case in their hand. They know what the evidence is. They have to profile the case. They have to profile the behaviors, the physical evidence, the circumstantial evidence. They have to profile this. So in reality, when people say who are profilers, I say it's the detectives on the case. Now, my opinion is some of them, unfortunately, haven't gotten much training in profiling or crime scene analysis. They've come up from the street and they become a detective. Some have good logic skills, some do not, but all of them could use solid training because they, in reality, are the real criminal profilers. And outside criminal profilers like myself, or even the FBI, we may have more experience over more cases than a small department, or even sometimes a larger department, because we've worked on so much that we've seen so many different things that we can be very useful as part of a team coming in and helping in a case. But in reality, the first 48 is where it's most important. And who has that in the first 48? The detectives. Okay, so the detectives, they had a location. And it was unlikely that this guy was coming in from another state. And since so many bodies were dumped here, the guy had to be someone who is theoretically in this vicinity, sort of like in that area. All right. And one of the things I noted about this crime, which I found kind of interesting, was that all the bodies were on one side of the road, and it was the side of the road that's going from east to west, not from west to east. And the thing, it's not absolute, again, it's a theory. But I always felt like, when you got a body in your car, you usually don't turn around. You usually know where you want to go. You go, drive there, you pull over, and you jump out and dump the body. And some people said, well, wouldn't people see this guy dumping bodies here? Well, clearly nobody did. Because when you see a vehicle pulled over to the side of the road, you don't think body dumping time. You think the guy's got to pee. It's some guy's out there and just taking a leak. That's what he's doing. Or maybe he's checking a tire, or maybe maybe he drank too much. He's just pulled over for a second because he's like, I'm going to take a break here. You don't think body dumping. And so the guy can even get out of his vehicle and have nobody be suspicious. They'll just drive right on by. They're not going to pay attention to the vehicle or the license plate because I don't think anything untoward is going on. And when he has that moment where nobody's coming, that's when he dumps the body. All right. So, but somebody had to be fairly comfortable with this area and be a person that knows the area very well. How often do police come around? How much traffic there is? And I always believed he came from this direction, this way. Now, John Bittroff, the serial killer carpenter guy, was up in a place called Manorville, and it was a little over this way. He would come over here, he would come down and go here. Okay. So that would be the correct direction. And there were some phone calls that were interesting that were linked to Massapequa area and also to Manorville area. So somewhere up there, there's some guy, And now when we take a look at Rex here, Heuermann, where did he live? He lived in Massapequa Park. Now, when I put him into the map, the quickest way to Gilgo Beach from here is this right around here and right around here. But as you can see, it's 29 minutes. But if he goes the other direction, it's all of 31 minutes. So we're talking about a 2-minute difference. Now, when you look at the map, you think to yourself, oh, obviously you just go this way. And then you go up here and you do a U-turn and then dump the bodies. Could this be true? Yeah, of course it can be true. Yeah, it can be true. Or I tend to believe he would have gone the other way because only 2 minutes longer. And then one would have to know why a person would choose one way over the other. Now, this is part of investigations again. Is there a reason why someone would go this way? Is it because there's less people on the road, less cops on the road? Is there some reason? Or going this way, is there some reason he wouldn't want to go that way with a body? Now, if he came around this way, dumped the bodies, and then just zoomed on home, there's no body in his vehicle. So, but I don't know. He could have gone either direction, but either way, it's 29 minutes or 31 minutes. And it's interesting. And I always use the word interesting because instead of saying, absolutely, this is what happened, I think it's interesting. And if I were investigating the case, I would be looking into movements and why he would make certain movements and not other movements, if he is the guy that did it. Now, we don't know, say at this point. I don't know what the evidence is. I don't know what they've got on him. I don't know if it's DNA or some. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I would think At this point, it would have to be some kind of DNA, because it's been a long time. And he is, is not a drifter. He's not a homeless dude. He's not a known rapist. He's not the person you want to just grab up and put and arrest for no good reason. All right. Especially on a case that's this significant, this well known. You don't want to be just arresting somebody for no reason. So I know there's people going to come out like they've done with Idaho and what they've done with Delphi. Oh, they're just arresting this guy to shut things down. No, those are such big cases. You just don't want to make a mistake. This is huge. So do I think he's a good suspect? Absolutely. Because he lives in this location, which is a good location for dumping bodies here. Secondly, he's in the architectural carpentry thing, which I've always leaned toward. Now, and the burlap bag issue. I would love to know what they're going to find at this house. Another thing I tend to believe, because of the burlap bags, is what did he drive for a vehicle at that time? Now, I looked in his driveway when some of these pictures. I thought I saw a small car kind of look almost like my car, like a Mazda Miata. He's kind of big for a Mazda Miata, if that's what it was. Because, I mean, he's not a small dude. And believe me, you don't want to be a big person with long legs or too much width in a Mazda Miata because it's uncomfortable as heck. I drive that. My son is like, oh, yeah, Ma, I got back problems. This hurts. And he's too big. He can't get that seat far enough back. So I don't know if that was his car or not. But anyway, I wonder what he drives. But I more wonder what he drove back then. Did he, because he's in a building with building industry, he does talk about, in a very creepy part of that little interview, he talks about his favorite tool is a hammer because it really knocks things in place. So he has tools and he deals with construction. So I don't quite know what his job is, how much of it was paperwork, how much of it was consulting, how much of it was hands-on. Therefore he had a truck in order to do part of his business. I believe the person had a pickup truck. Again, not absolute, but the reason I believe it's true is because of those burlap bags. Now, the burlap bags, for me, the reason he had them is to put bodies in them and to dump them in a place where burlap bags wouldn't be terribly noticeable, look like trash on the side of the road. And he probably just had them around. You stuff the body in. And then what do you do with the body when it's in the burlap bag? Well, if you have a nice car, if you have a Mazda, it's only a 2-seater, you're not going to put the body behind there. So clearly that's not useful. And the trunk is like this small. So you can't stuff the body in a trunk. And actually, this is a very interesting thing about where do you put bodies. I had a case once, and one of the issues was, could a body fit in this guy's trunk? And I was trying to find a particular trunk that was that size because I wanted to crawl in it. I wanted to see, could somebody fit? And when I found the car, I was like, yeah, that didn't happen. So it has to be a vehicle that works. So putting bodies that you've just bashed up or cut up and put them in your car, in your back seat, kind of messes up your car. It leaves DNA, it leaves blood, it leaves, you don't want to do that really because it's a lot of work to clean out the inside of your car. Therefore, it's easier to put the body in the back of a pickup because once you get home, all you got to do is wash that sucker out with a hose. Works really well. And it's not even suspicious because if you have a pickup truck and you've got junk back there and you have some junk in a burlap bag, it's not that weird. You got a burlap bag that looks like a body in your back seat and the police stop you. It looks suspicious. So I believe it makes more sense that the guy would have a pickup truck. So I'm curious to find out as we go along, did the guy have a pickup truck at the time the murders went down? Did he have burlap bags? Did he have a pickup truck? Clearly he was already he had the area thing set up perfectly fine. And he did work in New York. So that phone call that came out of New York where the killer sadistically talked to the sister of the girl he killed. Well, he has business in New York. So he is there. Now, one can't overstress that because anybody who lives on Long Island, that they would go into the city sometimes is not unreasonable. And they could even go into the city purposely to make a phone call from there because, like at Times Square, you got massive amounts of people. Nobody's going to pinpoint you. Maybe you don't want to make a phone call straight out of your house. You know what I mean? That kind of not a good idea. So that the guy made a phone call from New York City doesn't mean he had to have business there or work there on a regular basis. But if he did do that, it's certainly interesting that he will be in a location where it'll be easy for him to make that phone call. So I want to point out one more thing before I go, and that is about the kind of guy who would commit these kinds of crimes. When you have what appears to me to be somebody who's hiring prostitutes and taking them to a location where he is going to spend time doing something. Now, supposedly he's a married dude. He has a house right here in Massapequa Park. I'd like to know how often that wife wasn't around, or I don't know his whole family situation yet. Because if he's going to do that, he has to have some location where he can do those things, which would be a garage, a shed, or just simply nobody's around it when he picks that time, because he's got to do stuff. And after he does his stuff, then he can put the body in a vehicle and take it to a location and dump. But this takes away the concept of just somebody. What I call I only put serial killers really into two categories: fast and slow. Fast is the guy who's hiding in the bushes in a park, and a woman jogs by and he jumps out and he hits her over the head, pulls her into the bushes, rapes her and strangles her, and then he's on his way. I call him fast. He doesn't want to take that person home and sadistically torture them. And he think that's creepy, you know. I mean, what are you doing that for? You should just get it over with. His thrill is more in the kill, okay, the quickness of it and having done it, and that kind of guy usually doesn't have an overly stable home life. He usually is a guy who has trouble keeping jobs, and he's got his tags are never correct on his car. People keep throwing him out of their houses. Like if he does get a girlfriend, she dumps him after a while and he goes and lives with his sister, that kind of thing, where the guy's kind of, he can be stable for a while. He can have normal jobs, but the kind of guy that jumps out of bushes and stuff, it's not, he doesn't think things through real clearly. He just does it quick. Then we got slow. Slow guys are people who, like Dennis Rader, who like to torture women for a long time. Okay. And that kind of guy, and in a specific location, sometimes their homes, but sometimes the victim's homes, because he breaks in and commits that crime, but sometimes their own homes where they bring that person to a dungeon or something in their home. Those guys usually have more stable lives. They often have a job they've had for the last 20 or 30 years. They're known in the community as a guy that keeps his house really nice. Sometimes they have a wife, and sometimes they have children. And they blend into the community very, very well. And people are already saying, oh my God, I can't believe it's him. So the kind of guy who committed this crime, in my opinion, is a guy who's more stable and has a home, has possibly, the wife and children type of thing going, and a good job, and has money to have a decent life. And when he feels like it and has that opportunity, he goes out and enjoys his little sport or his little hobby. And he's smart enough to be pretty good about not getting caught. So the question is, if this is the guy now, why did he finally get caught? And we're all going to have to sit around and wait to find out the facts on that and find out whether they do have the right guy. His defense attorney, I'm sure already, is saying this is not the guy and all of that. But we'll have to wait and see. Let's not jump to conclusions. Is he a good suspect? Yes. Is he the Long Island serial killer? Or at least the Gilgo Beach serial killer? I do not know. But those are my thoughts on it. If you're new to my channel, please do like and subscribe, and check my playlist for all the other cases I have analyzed. And do check the links below for my previous analysis of the case, and also that creepy interview that he did about his business. They're both kind of fascinating. So anyway, hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.